Welcome as we gather together again for another study of the lectionary. You'll see that Pastor Shim is not with us today. He's actually, this week, he leads a music camp up at Camp Louisimo. And so he is just ending that camp this week, and we plan on seeing him next week. So thank you, Pastor Call, for filling in for him today.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
It's a little bit more of a challenge for Pastor Call to kind of fill in now, even though he's so used to doing it all of those other years, because we are in the one-year lectionary and Pastor Call is in the three-year lectionary. Yep. So I know we still I believe you still have the link for our Bible class on your website, right?
We do, right.
But it certainly does not fit with the lectionary that you guys are actually following at Faith Lutheran. And so, again, we're now at the 9th Sunday after Trinity. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, we're going to try to take a look at all three of the texts today. And I think that we can get through them. Though we say that every week and I rarely ever get there. The first one we're going to look at is the gospel text, which comes from Luke chapter 16. So you can kind of start to work your way over there. And then we're going to also take a look at 2 Samuel chapter 22. And we're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Now, the last couple of weeks, as we talked about this, the connecting theme was so obvious in those that it was something really easy to make those connections. This week, it's not quite as obvious. And so what we're going to do is, as we study these texts, as we take a look at them, I want you to kind of formulate in your head a little bit and through your meditation, why are these texts together? And of course, why are they during this time of year? That's probably a little easier, that we see that this is, we understand this in the idea of our life in the church. So those things would be obvious as to why during the church year they are. But why these three texts are together is maybe just a little bit more difficult. And then if you were to add to it, the psalm is Psalm 51, a beautiful psalm of David.
Oh, that is
Psalm 51.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and
in relationship to his hymn of his hymn of praise.
Hymn of praise.
In 2 Samuel.
And of course 1 Corinthians, and then how they connect here with this parable that we're going to be reading. So by now you should be at Luke chapter 16. We'll begin at the first verse, and of course this is Jesus is going to be speaking in parable. And we remember that if you remember back from your catechism days, and maybe even back to Sunday school days, we would talk about the parables as being earthly stories with heavenly meanings, right? We would use that. Yeah. And while there's truth to that, there is also an importance for us to understand that in a parable, while it's normal for us to try to see the similarities between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth, but really when you're looking at a parable, what makes a parable is not looking at the similarities, it's looking at what is the distinctions of it. What are the things that you see in the parable that just you will never see in real life, because that would be the significance of the parable. And we would see really that also with this parable. Also, if you remember Jesus, paraphrasing Jesus, he says, to you who know who know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven,
Yeah.
I tell you what's going on. To everybody else,
Yeah.
we teach it in parable, and it's kept from their knowledge, and so for us to be able to understand a parable, it would mean that he has given us some of those secrets to the kingdom.
Yeah,
of
right,
heaven.
right.
Because that would be the only way for us to understand the parable. If we looked at the parable, it would make no sense why it goes the way that it goes. But for us, what are those secrets of the kingdom of heaven that help us to understand the parable? And that's what we're going to try to unpack here today. So,
now one of the things,
Go ahead.
a couple of the things with regard to parables and why Jesus taught in parables was that he used familiar language to the listener with these veiled meaning. And by doing that, he gave them an opportunity to make a decision for or against him. So, much of the motivation for Christ to teach in parables was to give the listener a window for the Holy Spirit to lead them to Christ. Now, one of the, and I don't want to
go ahead.
belabor any of this, but one of the difficult things for us is that we have to determine even the language that was familiar to the original listener. So when Jesus talks about the managers and servants and land and different kind of soils, that would have resonated so simply and readily with the original hearer. That was their life.
Right.
But then there was that piece that gave them cause for repose.
yeah.
So they stayed in the moment to ruminate about the point, which was always about Jesus.
Yes.
The kingdom of heaven is among you.
It would be one of those where he kind of lures them in, leads
Yeah.
them in with things that are very familiar, and then he'll say something that is just totally off the wall, and it causes them to do just that.
Right. Right. What does he mean
What
by
does
that?
he mean by that? Because it would be so out of character to earthly life.
Right.
And-
Yeah.
And we see some of that here, and so this is what we're going to see in this parable. It's an interesting parable. This is also a parable that you will find in the 3-year lectionary season 2. Which is I think you're in season 2 right now, Luke.
That's correct.
So this will be a text that will come up in season 2. It is one that we see in both, but here in the season 1, it would be one that is taught or preached every year.
Now, what's interesting too about this parable is Jesus now. We move into a different chapter, but he now switches gears. So in chapter 15, we have those great 3 parables about lost and found things, with the top of the mountain being the parable of the prodigal son, right? And so, but now Jesus really switches our mentation completely, albeit he continues to teach one more parable.
Yeah, absolutely. He that's how it begins. He says, after he teaches the parable of the lost, all the lost, then it goes, now he also says to his disciples. So
you're right.
Is he switching? That's a great point. Is he switching direction, or is he adding another piece that is in connection with it?
That's a really great question.
So as we read it, we'll kind of ponder that and see, is this something that Jesus is going to move on to a new teaching, or the same teaching regarding the kingdom of heaven? Remember, always parables are speaking to us about the kingdom of heaven. It doesn't matter what the parable is. It's not a parable like I mentioned in my sermon. It's not like an Aesop's fable.
No.
It's not like words of Confucius where eventually everybody, oh, I get it. We shouldn't be so greedy. We shouldn't tell lies. It has nothing to do with that. It has all to do with, the understanding of, or the reality of the kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven like? And there is no one else that could teach us what the kingdom of heaven is like other than God himself.
Right.
Who
embodies the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. Who is the only one that is ever, that could know that kingdom of heaven. So here he says also to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. Now I find that to be kind of interesting, wasting his possessions.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that he was stealing.
No.
It doesn't say that he was skimming off the top. None of those kind of things. It says that he is wasting his possessions. So we want to kind of keep that in the back of our mind a little bit. It might help us to understand why the master responds the way that he does to the dishonest manager. Okay. So he calls him and he says to him, "What is this that I hear of you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." So he tells him he's been wasting possessions and you can no longer be the manager. So the manager says to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. So first thing you notice here, he doesn't complain. He doesn't argue with the charge that is brought against him. He doesn't say no or prove it or any of those kind of things.
Or tries to deny it.
Doesn't deny nothing. Nothing. So here he goes. What am I going to do? Well, and here's the interesting thing. I have decided what I am going to do. Notice what he doesn't do here is he doesn't repent.
No.
He speaks of what he will do. This is how I am going to, smooth over the situation.
Yeah, right.
So that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. And I find this to be really interesting because by him wasting the master's possessions, a couple of things really could happen. From the standpoint of the master, in Jewish law, the master would have the right to either A, imprison him, or B, to execute him. And so here, note that he is not in fear of either one of those things. He is not afraid of being imprisoned. He's not afraid of being killed. He's just concerned because I'm going to be without a gig. And so now what am I going to do once I'm out of this job? So he already recognizes the master's mercy and his compassion. Because the master has said, show me the books, and then we're going to move you out of here. And so he's kind of doing it kind of quietly. He's not making a big show of this. He called the worker in. He doesn't, and it's this one-on-one thing. You're going to be done. Bring in your books. All right. So he summons his master's debtors one by one. And he says to the first one, how much do you owe my master? And he said, well, I owe 100 measures of oil. Can you imagine if he calls the debtors in, how they're thinking? They're probably...
yeah, right. Fear and trepidation.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Did I miss a payment?
What am I...
Yeah, right.
And
is
so
he raising the rent?
Yeah, and so here he says, so how much do you owe the master? And he said, well, I owe him 100 measures of oil. So what we see here is these debtors. A better way to describe this would be these folks are renters.
You're right.
Okay, so what happens is,
Yeah.
is they produce a crop, they produce a product, whatever the case may be, and they pay the master a portion of what they raise. Okay, so that's what this is. So here he says, so what is your debt? How much do you owe him? Well, it's 100 measures of oil. And he says to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50.
Yeah, the operative there is quickly.
Yeah, there's one of that. That's right. That is one of the.
Not get back to me.
That's one of the operative words.
I'll talk to you next week. Quickly,
Yeah.
right?
Here's the other operative piece that we maybe don't think about. Take your bill and write 50. He doesn't take the pen and he go, okay, no, that you were 100, here, now you're at 50.
Yeah, yeah.
He says, you write it down.
Yeah, you write it down.
You write it down. And so what he's going to, we already are getting a clue here. What's he going to do? He's going to take in these negotiated things that are written in the handwriting of the debtors, and he's going to bring them in. That's the shrewdness of all
And there's
of
the
this.
shrewd, right.
There's
the shrewd operator.
The shrewdness
Yep.
is he didn't even do it with his own hand.
No.
He did it with theirs so that the master, if the master was going to cancel that new obligation or not fulfill that new obligation, it was an obligation written by
the debtor.
the debtor themselves. So that's, I think, is really
So
interesting.
who's cooking the books?
Yeah. So here he says, you just write 50. Then then he says to another one, how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. So you see the same thing here. Now, interesting, he brings these folks in one by one by one by one. He hasn't told them that he's been fired. Okay? So what do they believe? They would believe honestly that this manager is speaking on behalf of the master.
Yeah.
So this is the master saying,
Right.
yeah,
He's representing the master.
You get to keep more of your stuff than you thought you could keep before.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, right?
It's like a giant tax cut.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing. And then take your bill. The master now commends the dishonest the manager for his shrewdness.
That's such a fascinating reaction, is it not?
Yes.
To what his manager just did.
Yeah.
There isn't rage. The Roman soldiers don't show up. He's taken in by his shrewdness. Is that grace?
Is it? Yeah. It would. One, it would be grace. The other, might it be that's the lesson that he wanted him to learn?
Well, us for sure.
Us too,
We're
but
gonna,
also the man.
yeah.
We don't know from this that he actually fired the manager.
No, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did the manager finally do what the master wanted all the time? Okay. Remember what I said? The manager was wasting his possessions. How might he have been wasting his possessions? Well, Jesus talks in other parables, especially if we remember one parable where the the worker or the man, he works and works and works, and what does he do? He stores everything away in barns.
Right, yep.
Okay, and what good was it stored in barns when his life was taken from him, or when his life ended? Now there is, could that be the wasting? Is that instead of allowing the people to enjoy and to use their what they have produced, that he has been collecting it, he's been storing it away, and in essence, it's just going to waste. Could that be? I mean, we
That
take
is
a
a
look.
fascinating take
Let's
on this
look
parable.
at this once from the standpoint of stewardship. And we talk about our own stewardship and how generous are we? I mean, think about how generous are we really? Are we really abundantly generous with our stuff for people that are in need, or for the church, or for the first fruits given? Or do we store up in barns and kind of hold it for waste? Yeah, hoard it. Yeah, absolutely. And so might this be what the master wanted all along?
That is a fascinating take on that.
Is that his kingdom is a kingdom that would be theirs for free, instead of one that they had to buy into or pay rent into, or whatever the case may be. You started, again, as we remember the kingdom of heaven is like. That is the point here. And so the kingdom of heaven isn't like something that you can buy a spot in, or that you can rent your spot in. The kingdom of heaven is something that has been given to you for free. And so might that be how it was wasted? Now think about how who is he speaking these words to? He's speaking these words to the disciples, and to those that are around them, those that have been
primarily
following
the disciples,
those that have been those that have faithfully followed the Jewish laws. Those types of things. Is he saying to them, is he speaking about the generosity or lack of generosity of the Jewish leaders, of the Jewish church?
What's interesting about Christ's parables and his parabolic teaching is that often the first, the ones that have the best row, best seats in the house, are his disciples. Mm-hmm. So the parables are often originally directed to his posse, and obviously then you've got the crowds and the other people in the various gathering spots behind the disciples who get the message. But here again, so he's speaking to the church.
Yes, that's the point. That's an application for us during this time of year, this time of the church. I mean, again, what does that say about us? Or do we do the same thing? Do we waste the Lord's possessions? I would say, yeah, and we do. And how do we do it? I mean, and each church is going to be different. It might be a church that would be totally afraid to step out of its comfort zones for the sake of the gospel, because they're afraid that there's going to be nothing there. I mean, we use that term, and I used it in my message this week. That we save for a rainy day. Well, what is a rainy day? Is the rainy day the day that we believe that the Lord's not paying attention to us, or the Lord's not going to provide for us? Is that the rainy days that we're saving for?
Right.
Or could it be a church that has an endowment, that is concerned more about the growth and the stability of that endowment, rather than
the interest rate,
rather than using that for the sake of proclaiming the gospel, caring for the world around, those types of things. See, we waste God's possessions all the time.
By non-use.
By non-use. We waste those possessions by the lack of use. I mean, I think about how many, when we start to talk about, the very gift of his body and blood.
Yeah.
There were those, the period in the church where, maybe the pouring out of, the offering of Holy Communion was once a month or 4 times a year or whatever the case may be. These possessions of the Lord's that he says to use often, we wasted because we didn't. You see, these are all ways that we waste the Lord's possessions. And yet, what does he do for us is he doesn't condemn us.
No.
He doesn't condemn. He doesn't execute us. What does he do? He shows mercy on us, and he commends us even in our shrewdness. We would use maybe a term absolution in there.
But he does then make that he does raise up that comparison.
Mm-hmm. But then he certainly does use that. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than with the sons of light. We want to keep that in mind of the sons of light. Who is he speaking of there? He's speaking of the church. We are more creative with what we do outside of the church, but then we are inside of the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, that would be one way of taking a look at that. Right? And so we certainly don't want to overlook those words as he speaks of the sons of light. And he says, and I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of your unrighteous wealth. Yep. So that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. And so he reminds us that that earthly wealth, that the earthly possessions that we have, those things, they rust and they decay and they, they get moth-ridden and all of that. And eventually they will go, they will be gone. And so we are to use, the point is we are to use them. I have a little note that I have on my door, and I put it on my door almost 20 years ago. And it's just this thing that I keep in the back of my mind. It reminds me of the old Lucy, I Love Lucy show. And Lucy would do something, and and Ricky would say to her, "Lucy, you got some splaining to do." Well, I wrote this little note, and I just said, speaking to myself, if the church isn't in the red when Jesus comes, we might have a little splaining to do, about what does it mean that if we are putting things away and we are not using those gifts that God has poured out upon us individually and upon our church to proclaim the gospel message, we are being dishonest managers. We're being dishonest stewards.
Absolutely.
And yet the kingdom of God tells us, one, that that our Jesus was not a dishonest manager. Our Jesus was the one who poured out all the master's gifts. He poured out everything for our sake. For the sake of the world. He poured out everything, and it didn't matter if it honestly didn't matter if you believe it or not. He was going to do it for you anyway.
speaking of parables, the parable of the different kinds of soil.
Yeah, yeah.
And the word being, planted.
Right. It shows that, like, with a reckless
abandon on soils that Jesus knew were going to reject that seed.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, we're off parable here, and we'll get back to this one because they're related. But what's interesting about that parable is that out of the 4 different kinds of soils, there's only one soil that's receptive to that seed.
Right.
So a majority of the soils are going to reject the gospel. It was just it's one of the most tragic parables that Jesus teaches, but that didn't keep the sower from sowing all of it.
Yeah.
And we see a point that's similar here.
And so that's why I wanted you to make sure that as you saw this parable, that you noticed that the manager was called in not for stealing, not for skimming off the top. He was called in for wasting.
Yeah.
Wasting the mass. And what does it mean by wasting it? It means that he wasn't using it for what the master wanted it to be used for. And in the same way, we in the church, we waste. We waste the master's gifts, certainly in our own individual lives, but also as the disciples, as the church. And so here we see this image as he speaks to us regarding what this means. And again, note that the master commends him, like almost to the point of, now you get it.
Yeah, he's he's commended.
Now you understand. Now you get it. And again, it causes you to wonder, after that, did he get fired or not? Or did the Lord say, that's what I want, that's what we are to do? I don't know. So those are just some thoughts that we have on this first lesson here. So why don't we go from there, and let's jump all the way back to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 22. And in 2 Samuel 22, we're going to begin this kind of in the middle of the chapter. And we're only going to be doing a section out of the middle of the chapter here. And this again it is David's song. It's his celebration song, his song of deliverance. David has been at war, and he has been delivered from the war with the Philistines, and we see that he is now going to offer this song or this hymn up, and he is speaking about how it was God that has done the whole thing on his behalf, and yet in doing what God has done, he has also prepared David to be a soldier. I mean, we probably could have used a hymn this week like Onward Christian Soldier. Might have been a very appropriate hymn to use this week, though we didn't use that one, but you probably could in connection with this. So we're going to begin at the 26th verse, and I think that this is really interesting, and when we do this, because this verse, I believe, really goes in connection with that gospel lesson, right?
Right.
With the merciful, you show yourself merciful. And with the blameless man, you show yourself blameless. I think that this is really as he shows us in that gospel lesson that he is a God of mercy and compassion. And we see that certainly here. Verse 27, with the purified you deal purely, and with the crooked you make yourself seem tortuous. tortuous, not torturous. Tortuous,
tortuous.
would mean something along the lines of they're not going to know which direction you're coming from. That type of thing, right? With
unpredictable.
Unpredictable. I think that would be a really. Pastor Call's used to the bigger words than I am, so yeah. This would be a word that he would use in his normal vocabulary. So, and then we go here, verse 28. You save a humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them down. So, again, look at David here. He is making these comparisons but it shows God's love and his mercy upon those that are of faith, the pure of heart. That's what he means by the pure of heart. But that his law is firmly upon those that are here in this case the haughty. And you notice this, he doesn't have his eyes on the haughty to destroy them.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't say that.
He uses the words to bring them down.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us in good Lutheran terms? It means that his desire is to turn them, to lead them to repent. Why? So that they would be those that are saved, those that are dealt with blameless, those that are dealt with purely. That is the mercy of God. That's why our text really started at 26 with the mercy. For you are my lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. So again, we see David as we do, and there you can make the connection with Psalm 51, can't you? Where David speaks about created me a clean heart, renew a right spirit within me. He speaks about the fact that he is on his own, he is a sinner, that he has been sinful from birth, that there is darkness in him, and he asks the Lord in that psalm to create a clean heart. Well, he's doing the same thing here. You are the lamp, O Lord. And you are the one who lightens my darkness. You are the one that is my fortress and my strength. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. So here he is saying, he's not speaking about being a soldier for Christ to earn Christ's favor. He is saying that it is through Christ alone, through God alone, that he is seen as a soldier who will never tire. God will give him all that he needs for to persevere. And so and there I think a thought that just came to me. There we can connect almost with the armor of God that surrounds. The soldier.
That's a great connection.
That he has given us all of the armor of the Holy Spirit, so that we can be that soldier marching off to war.
I think of another connector to Isaiah 40. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall run with wings like eagles. They shall they shall run and not go weary. They shall mount up with wings as eagles.
That's really a good image.
The imagery is powerful here. Running against a troop, leaping over a wall. This is the very vivid imagery, and obviously. For David, this isn't metaphor. This is what he was doing. Literally, right?
Yes.
Running away from the troops that were, the two-headed monster of both Saul and the Philistines, right? Who both wanted his head on a silver platter, leaping over a wall. Great, powerful imagery here that David sets before us.
Verse 32, for who is God but the Lord? So here he this This is David proclaiming the first commandment, right? There
Yeah.
is no God but the great I am, who is a rock.
Now, and then we're gonna, for whatever reason, and when we get to I looked at the epistle momentarily. Mm-hmm. When we get to the epistle, the first verse of that chapter talks about, them drinking from the rock in the desert.
Yeah.
And in this, an epiphanal moment. And so Paul states that we'll go up to those verses, that Jesus was that rock. Mm-hmm. Wait till we get, it's fascinating. So here's a rock connection anyway to the epistle.
Absolutely. Then verse 33, this God is my strong refuge, and he has made, look at it, he has made my way blameless. David didn't make his way blameless. Yeah. God has purified him. God has made him holy. And of course, we know he is made holy through the very blood of Christ Jesus. And that's kind of where Paul is going in our lesson today. And that's right, and that's really what we see as we take a look at that parable today, and we talk about the manager, the manager that's there. Yes, we as the sinful church, we are the dishonest managers that waste, but the manager who is the Christ didn't waste. He used everything in its full. He is the one who canceled our debt. He is the one that forgiveness is going to be honored by the Father because of his cross. All of those kind of things, right? And so we continue on here, verse 34. He has made my feet like the feet of a deer and sets me secure on the heights.
Yeah, and there's that apex verse in there, right? You see that verse quoted often. That's a powerful verse. Again, the imagery, what do we know about the feet of a deer? Well, they're fast and light and quick. We've all seen deers flying around all over the place, in the city, out in the fields, right? So the imagery of the feet of a deer, a very significant imagery there.
He has trained my hands for war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your gentleness made me great. And that's where our text ends for this text. Yeah. And again, this is not speaking about, while it is true here, in its context, it speaks about David being now this warrior that can fight the enemy of the Philistines, and even fight off Saul. Though David always had a love for Saul, even in the midst of all of this.
He went to war for Saul.
But for us, as we take a look at this isn't saying that the Lord is making us strong for battle against a warring nation.
No.
This is that the Lord has made us. He has made us ready for war against that which is at war with us.
Yes.
Which would be against sin and death and Satan.
Yeah.
Always remember that. Sin
the unholy
and death
Trinity, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And he is the one that has prepared you for that. And he has done that how? He has done that with the promise of his word. He has done that with his word combined with these earthly elements. There's a connection that we have from there to our gospel text. Look at the earthly elements that are part of that text that the manager had been wasting by taking from the people instead of providing to them to use. And so we start to look at things like we talked about earlier, Holy Communion. You know, the earthly elements of bread and wine is where his body and blood are found, together with. And so if those elements aren't here for the people, that is what is there to strengthen and nurture their faith. You know, it's kind of if you look at it, it's almost a call to the church to look at having communion every time you gather in the Lord's house.
Yeah, well,
every week.
we do.
Yeah.
Every service. And
Yeah.
it took, to cross that bridge took a while.
Took a while,
You
but
know,
but we take
right, instead of every other week. Yeah.
But if we take a look at it, this is how the Lord prepares us for battle. And so
Yeah.
why would we want to take away some of the training? You know,
some of the our weaponry.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. And so as we look at that in the light of this time of the church year, this season of the church, this is a call to use all of the gifts that God has given us to continue to prepare people for war, to
That
prepare
spiritual
people for that
battle.
spiritual battle
Yeah.
against sin, death, and Satan.
Yeah, your connection to Ephesians chapter 6 is really significant here in the latter verses. You have given me the shield of your salvation. Now, I would encourage you folks to sometime this week read Ephesians chapter 6 about the armor, put on the full armor of God. And Paul talks about there the spiritual battle that we are engaged in every day as followers of Christ.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have, I think, about a little less than 20 minutes. So we're doing pretty good here. Why don't we, oh, by the way, that section of 2 Samuel 22, you're going to find a parallel to that in Psalm 18. It will be David's song of praise. It's the same piece as we find in 2 Samuel 22. All you have to do is go to Psalm 18, and you will see that there's great similarity between the two. So, yeah. And again, Psalm 18, the Lord is my rock and my fortress. Look at what the Lord, how the Lord is. It is really, if you take a look, and again, we only did just a little portion of the Psalm of 2 Samuel 22. If you go all of 22 and you look at all of 18, you're going to see a great parallel.
Right.
Here, verse 28. For it is you, Lord, who is my lamp. The Lord my God lightens my darkness. It's the same.
It's the same.
For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. It's
that
the
is just
same.
incredible. Yeah, right.
It's
right.
the same.
Very significant.
David writes it, and he includes it with his psalms too.
Yeah, that is just amazing.
You know, was it maybe something that he wrote back during this time of, as he was in the midst of this battle, and then maybe he took it and then he put it to tune before he gave it to the choir master.
Yeah, I don't know.
Something along those lines.
To the choir master, Psalm of David.
So, just to show you that they are.
That parallel is just really significant.
It's the same hymn of praise. So, all right. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We are going to begin at the 6th verse.
I'd like to take them. I'm sorry.
You go first.
Just take them.
You want to do the first part of it
just
too?
take them to the top. Go to the very.
Perfect.
Go to the very first
verse.
First verse.
Why don't you take us there?
The first 5 verses, and then I'll turn it over to Pastor Jeff.
Let's do
but
that.
here's the rock piece, and this is, it's always good to look at the scriptures in their context.
Always.
And then actually, it's interesting because in verse 6, now these things took place. Well, what things? Well, you got to go up there.
You got to go up there and see
I
what-
want you to know, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized. Now look at the verbiage. We're baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And I love this verse. And all ate the same spiritual food, and they all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. That is just an incredible connection to the rock from which the waters surged so they could remain quenched in the desert. That rock is Christ.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Anyway, those verses are just amazing, especially in connection to to David in Samuel.
Paul certainly makes that connection that that the rock of Christ isn't just a quote unquote New Testament thing.
Yeah.
That this is
There's Christ in the there's Christ in the wilderness.
there is the Christ is the one who sustains them in the wilderness. He is and it was here he's leading the people to again make that connection. That this same Christ that we proclaim to you today has been proclaimed all the way back to the time of Moses.
Right.
Yeah. So all these things he says, verse 6, they think as an example for us that we might not desire evil as they did. So again, he talks about the fact of their unfaithfulness, and in their unfaithfulness, though the Lord continued to pour out his many blessings upon them, they did not receive them in faith.
No.
And they perished. And he said, so, what does that mean to us? This is great. His question is almost like or his statement is almost like the great Lutheran question, what does this mean?
Yeah, right.
And so that's where he's going to go from here. That it takes place as examples for us that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were. And then he will use some examples.
Yeah.
As it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink, and they rose up to play. We must, and what that means, to rise up to play, he's not talking about enjoying life. He's not talking about recreation, any of those kind of things. What he is talking about is evil.
Debauchery.
Yeah, exactly. You remember the movie The Ten Commandments, right?
Yeah.
And Moses goes up on the mountain to speak with God, and what happens? They turn into into this debaucherous party, right? And you saw the evil intent that was going on, worshiping false gods. They were living in drunkenness and orgies and all of that, and you saw it all played out on the screen. And he is saying that do not be like them. That it's that call to faithfulness. The people sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. So he reminds the Corinthian church that. You remember they're in the Gentile world. They're in Corinth.
You were reading my mind, right?
Where idolatry and debauchery and drunkenness and orgies and all of this, same-sex relationships and animal sexual relationships and all of these kind of things that were going on around them.
You're right. And Corinth was a tough place to be as a Christian.
And he is saying to the church, remain steadfast in the same rock, in the same Christ, or, as you talked about in Ephesians 6, in the same armor.
Yeah.
And then, as we saw in 2 Samuel 22, that armor that has made you ready for this war that is going on. Well, we can certainly apply that to our world today, can't we?
Absolutely.
Because that is what is actually going on in our world today. And how easy is it for us to succumb to it?
Yeah, right.
Some of it actually looks kind of fun.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's very, the world we live in it's very seductive, and Satan does his best work in the innuendo and half truth. He tempts us with the doubt, with the half truth, as he did in the garden, right? Did God really tell you not to eat of that tree?
Yeah.
Right. So and that is where the devil has his day with Christians.
And
right.
I think that's a perfect way to describe the very next verse that's here.
Yeah.
You have it. And so we must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents.
Yeah.
And what was that test? Did God really say?
Yeah.
And that's a great example. And we should not grumble, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Okay? And so again, he speaks this to the Corinthian church. And of course, these words, because they are timeless words, they have the same meaning for us today. And that is, we must not be that. We must put on Christ, the armor of Christ, the Holy Spirit of God, and not be like the world around us.
Yeah, in the world, but not of the world.
Right.
And the great challenge for us as Christians is that we're not, and God bless the Amish, but we're not Amish. We're not separatists. He wants us to be in the world, to be a light of the world, and to offer our salt in the most unsavory places. And certainly no one speaks of this better than the Apostle Paul, for sure. I think my next sermon is going to be verse 10, just those two words, nor grumble.
Nor grumble.
Stay tuned, folks. That sermon is coming from Faith Lutheran. Nor grumble.
Nor grumble. Verse 11.
I love that.
We have 3 minutes.
We got 3 minutes.
We might come up with a few more sermon titles than that, but we've got 4 verses, 3 minutes. Verse 11. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. So note where Paul is making that connection, that the Spirit of God has inspired the writers to write those down for your sake, for a time such as this.
Yeah.
For right now, and the same thing applies to us here. This applies right now in our life.
Verse 12.
Go ahead.
As Pastor Jeff reads
You're
it.
next.
Okay. Underline it. Therefore, and here's one of Paul's great therefores. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. Yeah.
And he's speaking about standing on your own 2 feet.
You're right. Yeah.
But we can stand firm if we are wearing the armor of Christ.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
That is, so in Christ we can stand. There we are, onward Christian soldier marching off to war. Right?
Absolutely.
Verse 13. No
Great
temptation
verse,
has overtaken you that is not common to man. Okay, so that means that you aren't going to experience anything that hasn't been experienced before. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Now,
great stuff.
Understand, we've got about a minute. Understand that he is not saying that you are not going to be tempted.
No.
That you have all inside. You're not going to be tempted by anything more than you can handle. It doesn't say that. That you can handle it. But what it is saying that he is the one that provides the way of escape. He is the one that he is the one that provides a way out of that temptation.
And now connect in the 30 seconds. Now make this connection, folks, then to what Christ teaches us in the Lord's Prayer. Lead us not into temptation.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yep.
But then, when we do succumb to it, deliver us from evil.
Deliver us from evil.
There
Right,
is his way. There is his way out.
Yeah, right.
God is the one that does all the work.
He does. You're right. Absolutely. So what we're praying there is keep me from temptation and keep temptation away from me. Because rarely, folks, are you blindsided by sin. Mm-hmm. We generally walk into sin with our eyes wide open. Yeah. And that's really what Paul talks about here to a great extent.
All right. Well, we are at time, so thank you, Pastor Call.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's great having you with us, and
nice to
hopefully
see you guys
we'll have
again.
you a little bit more.
Absolutely, when Gangster can't be here.
And the Lord bless you and keep you as you continue to be His church, as you gather for worship, as you receive the gifts that He has to offer you, and as you continue your wilderness journey. And we'll see you next week.